Welcome to my session on preparing your modules for Drupal 9. My name is Joao Ventura. I've had an account in Drupal.org for way more time than I thought I would have. I helped to organize Drupal Dev Days in Lisbon, organized Drupal Europe also last year. Who has been to any of those two events? Well done. The others, you don't know what you missed. I'm a senior developer at 1x Internet in Frankfurt, but I mostly work from my home in Darmstadt, and we are hiring, so find us if you're interested. So, I like this quote from yesterday's talk from Gabor. The big deal about Drupal 9 is it's no big deal. So, what is it? Well, basically Drupal 9 will be Drupal 8.9 without all the deprecated APIs. That's what the message has been going. And today, and it's also very important, it will also have new versions of stuff. We don't know what those new versions are going to be, but it's not only that the modules that the APIs get deprecated, it's also there will be new versions of Symfony. You might have to want to test with that. And it will be released in June 2020. And for more details on why and how and how it happens, go see Gabor's presentation yesterday. So, which of you are still in Drupal 7 or are still running Drupal 7 sites? Okay, good. So, the good news or the bad news is you have 2 years, 4 months, and 20 days of your life to be ready for Drupal 7. I thought this was appropriate. So I've updated an image from Dries' blog. It was before, when he announced it in Drupal Europe, that we are here, used to be 2018. 1 year has passed, and it's only like 2 years. It doesn't seem much, but I can tell you, on one of my own experiences importing a Drupal 7 site over to Drupal 8, you are going to need those 2 years. So you should, if you're planning to port stuff, start planning it now. And another quote I like on how to proceed with this is from Lao Chi, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a simple steps. So let's go with simple steps. If you're in Drupal 7, well, you can already do the migration. The simple migration from core to core works a lot, and it's very good. And I advise you, if you're planning to do the migration, just start with it. Just do it and see what comes out. But there's still a lot of work to be done. There's 2 meta issues with lots of work. So if you don't know anything you want to contribute this week, go look at those 2 issues. I will post you don't need to note it down. I will post the link to the slides after. But go look into those issues and help us to get all those linked issues green. One thing that I would like to say, for instance, it's the multilingual entity translation has only been in core working since about 1 year. So before that, everybody that was using entity translation, and it was a lot, simply your nodes would not be correctly migrated. They are now correctly migrated. However, stuff like views are by design not migrated. So you will have to recreate them. There's a few workarounds. I simply would recommend don't bother. Just recreate them. They're not that hard to do. There's the upgrade status module. It's great. In 7, it will show you the current versions, if the modules you're using are already in Drupal 8 or not. In Drupal 8, it's also very good for checking if you're ready to go to Drupal 9, because it's basically a UI on Drupal check, which we will cover later. So, what if you are a module maintainer or your site depends highly on a module that has not yet been ported? Solution, maybe, is DMU. DMU, Drupal Module Upgrader. I worked a bit with it a few years ago. Most of my modules have now been ported, so I don't worry that much about it anymore. I don't know if it works. It worked extremely fine when I used it, so it just took care of all the boring parts of doing the routing YAML out of the menu hook, out of the changing the forms into form classes, etc., etc. So whatever came out was already goodish enough. So I would highly recommend it. You basically run it like that. Drush, DMU upgrade, and old Drupal 7 module, and it will spit out a lot of analysis and a converted code, which will not work. There's going to be a lot of annotations of stuff that your functions will even be empty. There's going to be a lot of annotations on you have to do this thing here, but at least the skeleton is there, so I highly recommend it. So what happens if the module has already been ported, but there's no Drupal 7 to Drupal 8 migration in the module? That means that the functionality will be there, but when you migrate, the data is not going to be ported. And a lot of that data might be content. Think about like the meta tags module. There's the field meta tag that attaches stuff to nodes. And if that field meta tag doesn't get carried over, then you don't get the special node configuration for meta tag. There are, in Drupal 7, basically everything uses the variable system to store config. In Drupal 8, it uses the config system. Meta tag already has some support for config, but it's in an issue. So, yeah, it's like famous examples of very popular modules that do not have a Drupal 7 to Drupal 8 migration are meta tag, web forms, rules, captcha, yes, and views. So what is the solution? Well, the solution is simple, and we all know how to do it. Go look into the issue queue, search for migration. There might be an issue there. If the issue is not green, then basically work on it until it's RTBC. Once it's RTBC, you're my hero. I don't have stickers to give, but you're still my hero. I want to briefly go to a very simple migration for config, like for instance the path auto module. This one stored everything in variables. So you see the variables here, plugin variable as source and the name of the variables. And the process here was very simple. It's basically wanting to stuff what was previously in these variables into the passautos.settings config. And the process is basically this. It's within passauto settings, like this punctuation ampersand is going to be filled with the data coming out of the passauto punctuation ampersand variable that was defined above. And most modules, you will only have to do this. Most modules that I know, they don't have really complicated data models. The configuration they have is a variable, and we're not reinventing the wheel when we port stuff over to Drupal 8. We simply basically transformed our variables into config, or maybe into state. And you just want to do this, like transform one into another. Very easy. Drupal modules that are very useful for the migration. So there's a lot of stuff in core that's very useful, like the base migration system itself, migrate Drupal, which is the base migration for migrating from Drupal to Drupal, the Drupal UI, if you want to have a UI, migrate Drupal Multilingual, which is the simplest module that you will find in core. It's basically one function and like 3 lines in there. I think the info is bigger, to be honest. So this is basically a flag. If you enable this module, you're signaling that you want your multilingual support to be, your multilingual migration to be enabled. And then there's a lot of stuff in contrib. So Migrate Plus defines a lot of extra useful plugins. There's one I like a lot, the table plugins as source and then destination. That basically, if you're just using a MySQL table, you probably don't even have to write your own plugins if you're using the stuff in Migrate Plus. Migrate Tools, as it says there, that's basically Migrate loves Drush. So Drush support for migrate, migrate upgrade, which is basically the migrate Drupal support for Drush, and migrate devel. It's really useful also. It's broken somewhat in Drush 9, I think. There's an issue there to fix it, but it's if you're running a migration and you want to develop to debug it, it shows up what's going into the source part, what's going into between the process part and the destination. So you can sort of see what's happening without having to insert, I don't know, xdebug or whatever. And I'll go very quickly to this. This is what I used to migrate my own site. So basically, you start with a minimal install, then you enable all the modules that you want. There's a big list here. Important ones that you enable the migrate ones. Then you enable some themes, and then you run Drush migrate upgrade legacy DB key for where Drush can find your old database, legacy root, where all the files from your old site can be found, because all the files are also going to be migrated into new file objects. And it works, honestly, just try it. So once you've migrated, now you're in Drupal 8. So how to get ready for Drupal 9 once you're already in Drupal 8? So as it's very common to say, Drupal 9 is going to be 8.9 without all the deprecated code. So what you have to do is to find that deprecated code. Find that deprecated code is nowadays it's very easy. So you run Drupal check. I've got a small system, so I installed Drupal 8 with token module, and I installed Drupal check. And to run it, you basically run Drupal check, and it said, and you pass it the complete pass until the module you want to analyze. And then you got a big list of stuff that's been deprecated. And some of these, let's look, for instance, no, that's too much. Like, for instance, some of this is fairly easy to see that it's file default scheme, file prepare directory. These are functional codes that one can almost guess at one point will all be deprecated. There's some further ahead, like this one, file unmanaged copy. It's one of my favorites. It's already been marked as deprecated. It's very, very trivial to replace. It was also in Gabor's presentation yesterday. Let me just do like here, file, unmanaged copy. And if we go look at its source code, it's basically you're getting the service, the file system service. Don't worry about this. And then basically you're using the copy method on that file system service with the parameters that you got, source, destination, and replace. The only thing is, and that's a bug in Gabor's slide, which I haven't told him yet, it's the default replace is file exists rename, whereas the default in copy is not rename. It's something else, I think. So you might want to change that. And getting back to the presentation. So now you found it, but notice that unlike PHP, you found it, but you don't know when you can start using it. It's one of those things like when you go into PHP and you see a function, you can scroll down a bit and know, oh, this function started to be used since PHP 7.1. So if your client is running on PHP 7.0, you know you cannot use that function. Unfortunately, our own code doesn't have any of those annotations. Maybe we can eventually look into fixing it. so that you can also immediately see I cannot use this function if I'm supporting Drupal 8.6, which you should at the moment. Once stuff gets into Drupal 9, we'll be basically supporting only Drupal 9 and 8.9, so that will simplify also the task of maintaining modules. How to guess what it will be? So this is the tricky part is, there's a Drupal check tells you what is already been deprecated, but you're writing something new, and you might also already look into stuff, and this doesn't seem like it should still be in Drupal 8. You can go check the issue queues that I mentioned, that I'm mentioning here, like this type, like remove legacy code. There are a lot of other deprecate areas that don't have anything to do with legacy code, but the work is ongoing, and we're all probably Drupal core committers, not committers, contributors. So we know that once you write an issue, it takes a few years until it actually gets committed. So the work is there probably, it just hasn't been committed yet. And you can already go and look for it. Usually there's already a good replacement. As a rule of thumb, anything that's legacy functional code, like all this file managed and unmanaged, like the Drupal underscore get path and whatever, all these functions that you know are coming all the way from Drupal 7 and they haven't been removed yet. These eventually will get deprecated. We don't have a lot of time to do that. We only have until Drupal 8.8 to deprecate everything that will not continue on to Drupal 9. So as you know, so what we mark in Drupal 8.8 can be removed in Drupal 8.9 and 9.0, I mean. But what we mark only in Drupal 8.9, which is basically going to be at exactly the same time as Drupal 9.0, it's too late. So we're not, once Drupal 8.8 arrives, you know everything that's going to be deprecated. Problem with that is Drupal 8.8 will freeze its API way before December when Drupal 8.8 comes along. So I think like in October, it's when all the deprecations will be known. And we need a lot of help in that kind of meta issues to make stuff happen. So I would recommend that you join the contributions to work on that this week. Yeah, so try to avoid functions like functional code. And one thing that you can do, like we did now, is to open their implementation and just look at what you can use. Maybe you don't actually need to use that old function. Maybe you can already use new stuff. Maybe you already can use the dependency injection for the file system and not worry about that part of the code. So this is basically the file managed copy again. So in the end, you replace it with that. And you just grab the bold part, like file system copy. Drupal get path. This one is not deprecated. It's not. There's an issue on working to mark it deprecated, but you actually don't need it. You can also just replace it with dir name, Drupal service extension list modules. If your type parameter there was a module or whatever it is. So if it was theme, then it's extension list theme here, and then get path name token, which is the module that you're pointing to find the path. So even though it's not deprecated yet, that's a function you can already use. And whenever it gets deprecated or not, you're ready for it. You don't have to care. So Drupal get path is a bit complicated because the real implementation is already dir name and another function that will probably get deprecated. And then there's a lot of stuff that you don't care about. And yeah, so you got the idea there. The other thing that, thank you. The other thing that a lot of people don't remember, other than the deprecation, it's there will be new versions of third-party libraries. If you were just in Jess's session a while ago, this was a big part of it also. We will, for sure, have new versions of Symfony. It's not known if it's Symfony 4 or Symfony 5. There are already meta issues on working for those. So if you want to play with Symfony 4 in Drupal 8 already, it's the first issue. If you want to play with Symfony 5, I think it's mostly a shell issue at the moment. I haven't paid too much attention to it because it's like 1 month old, the second issue. But it will eventually also have some kind of alpha support for Symfony 5 for Drupal 8. So if you want to be future-looking, you can patch your site with those merges there, with those patches there, and see how it goes. Maybe your functionality is not ready for Symfony 4 or Symfony 5. Maybe you can already make it ready just a few months earlier without being surprised when it will arrive, when Drupal 9 arrives. Yeah, so on the other end, at one point the Drupal 9 branch will be created. All these merges will start, all these patches will start to be merged into Drupal, into the 9 branch. At that time, you probably don't have any trouble of having to solve merge conflicts with whatever else you have in your site. So, and it should not be also too long. I'm expecting that by the end of the year, it needs also to be created, this 9x branch. Probably at the same time that the 8.9 branch. Sorry. Probably at the same time that the 8.9 branch is going to be created. And this was the end. We are working a lot on these issues that I mentioned. There's Gabor working in Drupal 9. I'm wanting to work on migration and D7 to D8 migration. Anybody here is a module maintainer that has a Drupal 7 version of their module? None? Wow. Great. So you don't need to worry then about having to, but if you're shy and you have a Drupal 7 module and a Drupal 8 module and you simply don't have the migration path yet, come to me and let's talk about it. I really would like to see that most people can simply migrate a site and get their data across. If you want to work on meta tag, the issue is there. If you want to work on web form, I didn't find any, and it's probably quite a beast to try to migrate, probably as bad as views. And the others I mentioned, there's a lot of popular modules that don't have any migration paths that it would be nice if you want to work on it. So you'll probably find me there this week. Jess said that this doesn't work, but when it does, please, yeah, and that's it. Thank you. Mulțumesc. Yeah, so that's that. The question is, what happens when Drupal 9 gets released and the current info YAML file has a core property indicating the compatibility of the code with currently with Drupal 7 or Drupal 8, and what happens with Drupal 9? Because that's a very good question. That is a question I asked Gabor yesterday, and he also doesn't know the answer. If the plan is, like everybody's saying, that Drupal 8 modules will simply work in Drupal 9, I guess that Drupal 9 will do something, just be ready to accept. On the other end, maybe it's time, and it's one of those things that I don't like about the current Composer Drupal packages, that, as you all know, it's packages.drupal.org/8 or /7 for those few using Composer with Drupal 7, which is possible, to be honest. Ask me about it. But the fact that the major version is not in the Composer part of the definition, but in the packagist itself is really weird. And I think it's time that we move over to really well-defined semantic versions, so that if you have a version 1.0 of your module, it will not be the 8.x-1.x branch. It will simply be the 1.x branch. And your module will be 1.0, 1.2.0, whatever. And then core compatibility is like a minimum core version that you support. But the later modules, the later core versions also are okay with it. And if you at one point you find, oh, my module is no longer compatible, or the 1.x branch is no longer compatible with Drupal 9, then you probably just write in the info YAML or just in the composer part of JSON, composer JSON of your module that you require Drupal core 8, greater than 8 and less than 9. And if you do that, then you cannot install that module in Drupal 9. And you do another branch that's compatible with Drupal 9 for some reason. Ideally, I don't think we don't have to create new versions, but nobody knows. It's
There is several issues for Drupal.org infrastructure.
yeah.
And one of them is cannot be versioning, and if one gets it, there is a plan to move dependency management to instead of managing.
No more info YAMLs.
Well, there will be info YAML because you have some other information in info YAML.
Yeah. So the libraries that you use. And currently it's redundant anyways. For if you have a composer file in your module and a info YAML file, you're basically writing the same thing in both places. Okay, good. So thank you all for coming. And if you have any further questions, you find me around. Thank you.